So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. If you are new to the meeting, please introduce yourself. Also, please don't forget to add your name to the meeting minutes. Let me share the link to the meeting minutes. If you're new to the meeting, please introduce yourself. If you have issues with the audio, you can use the chat. So we are 2 minutes after, and Nitish is here. So Nitish, would you like to?
Yep, sure. So yeah, now I'm going to demo the inventory wallet that is actually a way of representing the filters that can be dropped onto a node in MeshMap. So I have MeshMap over here, and I'm currently dropping a component. And we can actually take a filter and then drop it onto a component over here. So this way, like you can see that there's a inventory wallet over here, which shows the number of items inside that a particular inventory wallet. So this is what we call as an inventory wallet. So, and these are items that are inside that. So right now we have two envoy filters. So this is a way of representing the filters that are attached to a particular node as of now. So is that it? I mean, like, do any of you have any comments or?
I felt anticlimactic for a second there. I guess that's it. By the way, is my, yeah, good. Sorry, just checking my microphone. Mic check. Okay. Cool. So you dropped two filters on there. And with the discussion that Utkarsh was having last week, he was introducing everyone to some of the Istio's new APIs for managing WebAssembly plugins, I think is what they were, the new term. But part of that management was, we discussed a little bit about the explicit ability, the ability for a user to explicitly identify what where and what sequence to chain these WebAssembly filters and to plug them in. And so it's a curious note, or a curious, like this is a really advanced concept for this user interface here. But I'm curious, as a user potentially drops in more than one filter, is there any amount of control that the user has today over the placement of one filter in front of the next? In terms of, and this isn't, I'm just kind of, thinking aloud, this isn't like a critical item. It doesn't, I think a lot of times, I think a lot of times people think of this type of a design as traffic flowing from left to right, just because there's sort of there's an implicit convention of drawing your diagrams like that. There's nothing on this diagram right now that indicates the flow or the direction of what filter would be invoked first. And so consequently, there isn't necessarily meaning to the fact that one filter is on the left-hand side, one filter is on the right-hand side, like that. There's no, and I'm assuming that as someone goes to edit that filter and configure it, that part of that configuration would be identifying which of the two comes first in the chain, which of the two comes first in the sequence. And that doesn't necessarily need to be, at least now, it doesn't need to be visually reflected. But I figure I'll just, I'll draw attention to this and let it kind of permeate in the background about the potential, like Utkarsh, last time we were speaking about filter chaining last week and the ability for a user to identify what sequence to place these. There was, if memory serves, it felt like there was some, so that was fairly curated. Like there were potentially 3 pre-designated spots that you could, it was like pre-authentication, post-authentication, something like that. And so not that we want to necessarily curate or design this particular service mesh agnostic experience around one specific service mesh, but it's worth just a moment of reflection to think about the chaining, filter chaining, and how that's visualized.
Also, so today, if we get time, I will actually also demo that how we can, like Mishri, although Mishri didn't add a line of code, but Mishri supports WASM plugin now. So you can actually use that for dropping in remote WASM binaries. So that is something that, Mishmap can also probably bring in. That is right now, I think this thing, like we get this particular UI, this particular interface only if you drop in Onward filter, but because Mishri supports, it supports WASM plugin. So you can actually do the exact same thing that we were doing earlier with basically longer YAML, more verbose YAML, and more, I would say, more a component which is more specific to Onward and Istio. So yeah, basically we can probably bring in that particular component, support for that particular component in Meshmap as well. That is, if you drop in WASM plugin component, probably we can show it here just like we are showing for Onward filter. I think right now it does only for Onward filter.istio component, if I'm not wrong. Is that right, Nitish?
Yep.
Wow, there was something fairly special about what Utkarsh just said that I don't know that everyone necessarily grokked, and that is that, a lot of times when people are coming to a service mesh for the first time and they're understanding it, it certainly used to be the case that there was a sense of like magic sprinkles happening in the background. Like you would onboard your workflow onto a service mesh, and then magically you get, like, without any code change, you get, well, any number of things, new telemetric signals, traces, logs, and metrics about new observable signals that are coming out of your workload. You get some additional security. You get all these things, right? And you get all that without any code change, and it feels like, to some of us, that's like wonderful, and it's a warm blanket or whatever. To some of the rest of us, it's like, wait, it's like someone's trying to, it's like the magic behind the scenes makes us feel uncomfortable, because it's like, wait a second, what's really going on back there? Like, and so anyway, when we reflect on what Utkarsh just said, so that it was that statement, when you bring your workloads to a service mesh, there's no code change needed. And like Utkarsh, I think you just said, Meshri supports a new set of APIs coming fresh out of Istio with no code change to Meshri, which, okay, that I'll take it as a warm blanket, I guess. Like that's pretty cool. Huh. So good. Just to round off, I guess, Nitish, if you're looking for feedback from folks. And so, by the way, for Ruben and Hardit and Deep and anyone else who might not have been around a lot of the calls for a while, and Michael, like the reason that Nitish is showing this is so that you can express, weigh in, and any feedback is valid feedback. Sometimes it's just like, there's two. Sometimes it's like, hey, why are those two items, those two filters inside of that inventory, why are they overlapping? Is that intended to connote like some connectivity, or that one comes before the next, that there's a sequence here or something? That's a valid question. Quick question, the inventory number where you have two, you're showing that the inventory for this particular node, this gateway node, has two WebAssembly filters associated to it. The blue-black background, if a node color was, I'm sorry, will that inventory background always be the same color as its parent node?
Yeah, you mean, yep, like it would be the same color as the parent node.
Okay. Gotcha. Two little children inside.
Yeah, and just a small correction, like, yeah, this is currently supported for other components as well, not only for Istio. That is like, if the component actually has the name filter on it, it actually treats it like a filter, and that allows it to do this thing. So right now, that's how far we are right now. So, but probably we might have to, make it more strict or something. But
Yeah, actually, so about that, although we haven't gone so far here yet, but the idea was that probably we should treat onward filter like a trait rather than, so if someone is not aware, trait is actually an OM construct, open application model construct. So yeah, the idea was actually to treat onward filter and stuff like this as trait. The benefit would be that traits already have that metadata that to what this particular thing can be attached. So in that case, if we won't have to build anything on the UI, it would be already provided by the adapters, basically the components that are actually generating it. So that's something that we can probably look at, not today, later, because one of the issues that we can actually encounter is that probably onlyfilter.istio is not going to work if we drop it on linkerd component, or yeah. So that's something we will have to take care of. Not, I mean, definitely in future, because we haven't got too far with generating traits and workloads, all of those things same time. So yeah, just a suggestion. Does anyone have comments or? So let's move on to the next item. And so our next item is actually from Gaurav. Is Gaurav here on the call? So Gaurav is not on the call, but just to give a brief idea that what this topic was all about. So in case someone is here, I see a lot of folks on the call today. That's not very common with WASM calls, but I see a lot of folks in here. So probably if someone is interested in the in this particular thing, they can actually collaborate with Gaurav. So just to introduce what the topic is. The topic is actually having multiple imports in the UI. What that is. So if you would actually open a Mystery, you can go in under configuration. There's a section called patterns, filters, applications. Let's talk about patterns first. So in here, you can see actually two buttons. One is upload by URL. One is upload by upload pattern directly from file systems. If you click on it, you would actually have this particular file opener, file system API, from which you can actually upload your pattern YAML directly. And the second thing that you get is actually import by URL. In here, you can actually paste in any HTTP URL, and that would actually download that particular pattern, and will actually also save it to your particular account. The third thing that also Mystery server supports is actually the ability to import patterns from GitHub or other remote providers. private repositories, public repositories, both are supported depending upon the provider that you're using. It has it also supports recursive import. That is, you can specify that, okay, in this particular repository, I want to import every pattern that exists in this particular directory. So yeah, these are some things that actually Mystery Server's API supports right now. But as you can see, we are not exposing those functionalities at the moment. This is something that Gaurav has been working on for a while, but I think collaboration is always good. So if someone wants to collaborate, wants to take a look at it, that how these things are working, you can actually contact Gaurav on Slack, or if you have a GitHub issue. Do we have a GitHub issue about this? I think we do.
Navendu, I wonder if you might be able to find that one.
So I think, yeah, Navindu would add the link to the issue. You can actually comment on the issue if you're interested on this particular thing. The link to the doc is something that we send out the chat. This is where it's documented that how the API actually works. So yeah, if you're interested, collaborate. Let's move on to the next topic, and that's for Alan, and Alan's not actually here. So Lee, would you like to speak a bit about it? Because actually it's been a while. I think Alan mentioned he doesn't have access to a doc or something.
Oh yeah,
maybe
sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Meshmate Aditya, he's not on, is he? So if he isn't, I will happily steal his thunder. All right, good. Let me give some context for this particular line item, which is, so Alan has been in the community for a little while. His forte is UX, and so he had been expressing some opinion or giving some feedback about an upcoming design, and I think it was just one quick point that he had made, and I think it was apt. That is on the concept of service mesh patterns. So wait a second. This call is about WebAssembly filters. And so we're going to talk about service mesh patterns for a moment in order to ask ourselves if something similar that we're developing for service mesh patterns is also ideal for WebAssembly filters. So on this call, we occasionally talk about WebAssembly filters just onto their own, the tech that goes inside, how to provide support for any Envoy-based data plane, of which, I don't know, there are like 5 or 6 or more service meshes with Envoy as its data plane. We spend some of that time looking at Istio specifically because it's really the only service mesh out there that officially supports WebAssembly filters at the moment. But any of the Envoy-based data planes are capable, and we've proven that a couple of times over. Good. So then we talk about service mesh patterns on the call as well, because within a given service mesh pattern, a user is capable of expressing really any configuration that they want for their service mesh, including the deployment of filters and the configuration of those filters. Now, when someone goes to choose some pre-written patterns and deploy them, apply those patterns to their infrastructure, to date, that has been, just a growing collection. As a matter of fact, we're talking about it at KubeCon China, but there's just a growing collection of pre-written patterns, like best practices that people can choose to go deploy. There hasn't been really a catalog of what those are. And so there were, I think last week, just 2 fairly quick mock-ups created for Meshery.io, where a catalog of patterns would be presented to a user that's perusing the website. They'd be able to filter on different types of patterns. And then when they click on a pattern, they would potentially get a modal like this, more or less just a regular shopping cart sort of catalog experience. They'd click on a pattern, get more details, see related patterns, if they see the compatibility of the pattern, when they might want to use it, when they don't. And at some point, like immediately it would be like they would click to copy that URL, take that URL and import the pattern into Meshery. At some point, potentially in the future, maybe that's a little more of a direct connection, but if you kind of get the point about this catalog and letting people peruse it and find, common, best practices that they might want to apply. If you think about that same concept toward filters, WebAssembly filters, that in the upcoming release of Meshery v0.6, which is like, what did RC1 come out on Thursday last week? So v0.6 is just around the corner. It will come with a few patterns and a few filters out of the box. You can add your own, but it'll also come with some baked in. And okay, well, when the user goes to spin up Meshery and kind of look around and look at what filters are available, they're not going to be very well described at the moment. Like, it's going to be the name of the filter, which is hopefully indicative of like what the thing does. But if someone wants to find out more about, like, if the name of the filter is the JWT 9000, which I think is literally the name of one of the Pranav, was it Pranav Bot that had written this, the JWT manipulator 9000? Yeah. Like, what does it do? Well, there's only so many docs about what it does. And we've given demos and other things about this particular filter on this call, but that doesn't help Meshery users as they go to discover and understand what filters are available. And so that's kind of the question on this call is, does it make sense? What do you all think about the potential like catalog-like experience in Meshery's user interface? Is that not serious enough? Like is that too divergent of a UX? Is there something more, more simple that can be presented? More simpler? Is there something simpler that can be presented that where people just have a hyperlink and it'll take them over to the filter itself where it was sourced from and explain some stuff about the filter? Or is that just a poor man's catalog? Like, anybody have thoughts about this? I suspect it would help if we brought up Meshery's UI and sort of took a look at what's currently there. And I'll spin up Meshery while you all contemplate that. Does anyone have any immediate thoughts? Let's see. Make sure. I'm just doing a quick build. Nice. Oh, got it. Hardeep. Yep. Very good. Yeah, that's a good question on Hardeep. So Hardeep was like, as we're talking about this potential filter catalog, it's like, yeah, this is a similar concept to what we were just discussing. This is a little bit, yeah, I don't know, like the service mesh catalog that we were just looking at. I think that that's pretty similar. Here, let me. There's this, I'm sorry, did I just say service mesh catalog? I meant to say service mesh pattern catalog, that like on meshery.io, there might be a catalog of patterns that are user contributed and people can, grab that. This is a draft version of what the catalog would be, but like people can go out, choose from the catalog and say, yeah, that one, they can import it like into their deployment. That I think in this way, these two concepts are kind of similar. Like there's a hub, there's an online catalog people can bring and contribute to. So just kind of like a Docker hub. For the And so, but for the WebAssembly filters, to the extent that that hub isn't a standalone site, that is separate from people actively running Meshery. So I think I'm running Meshery now. So if you're running Meshery deployed either locally or in your remote Kubernetes cluster, if you're in this app and you're actively managing your infrastructure, you're actively managing your mesh, I think that the nuanced difference would be that you might have a catalog here, as opposed to and it would be sort of, a hub inside of your deployment, as opposed to something separate. But Hardeep, I think, has made a good analogy, like, hey, here's a way of sharing WebAssembly filters, or like a Docker hub, like there's a way of sharing, like a service mesh patterns thing. And so actually, Hardeep, I'm glad you brought this up, because for my part, I hadn't, like, a next step beyond what I was just describing is, well, geez, if there's a catalog of service mesh patterns, there's a catalog of WebAssembly filters, like, should those two things be separate? Maybe those two things should be together. There should be one, like a service mesh catalog, not just the patterns or not just the filters, and that's certainly something to think about. Like, should the focus of that experience be as a site that people can peruse, interact with, add their own, do hub-like things? Or as a focus on the UX, should that be sort of in something like Meshery itself? What do you all think? I don't know that I have, for my part, I don't know that I've have an opinion. Like, I have to think about it. Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Hardeep. That's good. Yeah. So it's something to think about. Like, there have been a number of people who've contributed WebAssembly filters already. There've been a number of people who've contributed service mesh patterns, and we're trying to create a place where people can create their own patterns and just selfishly hoard them, or where they can share them with others. I think sometimes that sharing and that process of discovery is maybe easier if it's a standalone site. Like, there's the barrier to looking at the catalog and perusing it as low as it can be. You just open up your web browser. It can be a little harder maybe to share. I mean, it's really easy to share something like this. Like, you click on it and like, oh, click the button to share it, and you send an email or something. But it's not as so that's really great. An aspect of having a catalog in Meshery is, like, if you're another Meshery user, then you can ongoing kind of track the fact that you shared with someone else, and maybe Nitish, who's on the call, maybe he only wanted to share his pattern with Utkarsh that's on the call. And so sharing in that sense is maybe easier to control when it's in application. I suppose if you have a website that has user accounts, you could do the same thing there. I'll drop a link to the mockups, which is just in the Meshery architecture deck. Anybody have any other thoughts on this before we move on? I do think that one thing that's kind of a challenge for new users is they come into Meshery and they look and they see, oh, this is great. Like, there's some patterns that are available. There's some filters to use. Okay, so yeah, what's this test filter do? oops, sorry. Okay, so it looks like it, like they're going to have to think about it a bit. There's not too much of a description. Like that's probably a problem. Do we need a catalog to solve that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not, but okay. I'm gonna stop there. Feedback is welcome.
So let's move on to the next item. It's from actually Mario or Abhishek. I don't think Abhishek Kumar is on the call. So Mario, do you have any updates? Not maybe in terms of code, in terms of something that you discovered while you were looking into testing, uploading and deletion of patterns.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Well, I was taking a look at the example patterns provided, also at documentation for this feature. So I'm just trying to. I'm actually thinking about what's the best way to get the pattern file from the test. So one option is to add there's a fixtures folder for in Cypress, but doing that might not be the best option because if there's any change to that pattern, maybe we'd like to use the latest one. So then I was looking for a way to download the files directly from GitHub. So I'm not sure what's the best option. Maybe we really don't care like what version of that example pattern we use, but maybe we do. Anyone has any feedback about that? Like, do we really care like if our test starts using an outdated pattern file? I'm not, yeah, the filter file. I'm looking at the filter, sorry. And the sample pattern or filter file is, I think it's in there's a repo for pattern for filters, right?
Yeah, there is.
It's in the link there in the description actually, but valid pattern file in the implementation notes. Yep, that's the one. Cool. So there's some patterns there. Yeah, the filter one. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking in using. So my question is like, do we want to grab the latest one every time, like dynamically, download it from GitHub during the test run, or just copy it, have it in our Cypress test fixtures file, folder. That's my question.
Wait, let me, I think I was trying to have too many conversations at once. For my part, let me regurgitate this real quick. It was, in part,
Sure.
you were highlighting that as we go to have these end-to-end tests, that we want to make sure that the tests themselves continue to be valid. And as such, we recognize that whether you're using a filter, a specific version of a filter, or a specific version of a pattern, that
They both work, right? They all work. So we want compatibility. Okay, so then would it work if, let's say, so I can grab a copy of this file, paste it over at our Cypress fixtures folder, and just version it as 0.0.1. And that way, whenever there's another one, we'd have to manually add it, and then I can make a dynamic test. So just like, the Cypress is based on Mocha, so we can make some dynamic tests. So we create an array and just point to any files with this like the group of files, all versions we have locally, I mean in the Cypress fixtures folder, and then we can test with all of them. So maybe that'd be good. Because that way, because otherwise I was looking at a way of downloading like the latest like GitHub content, but maybe that would add some more complexity whenever we want to look at like different versions of that file. Not sure if that's possible. So
I think there are two things that you're highlighting that are probably like universally true or like universally very hard to argue against. So one is that in any type of test that you're writing, you really, like anytime you write a test, you're taking on more things to sustain. Like at some point the tests get outdated. And so the more that you can write those tests to be anti-fragile or to be long-lived, or to, like, part of that is what you're saying is like to also just not produce false positives, understanding that a test itself might get aged. That thing, I think that's universally true. Like, yeah, we should. And then the second thing that's part and parcel to that is like versioning things. It's like really hard to argue against the validity. Yeah, the benefit of like versioning stuff. So like, part of your proposal is like, hey, should we make sure that we're versioning both patterns, and then also as the community goes to at least seed an initial set of WebAssembly filters, perhaps those should be, versioned as well.
Yeah, because looking at the test, it'd be really good to have those dynamic tests, because whenever there's a new version of some sample filter pattern file we want to test against, we just need to copy that new one in the Cypress fixtures folder, and the test would automatically pick it up as long as it follows like a naming convention, which I think we can just add some comments in the test itself, like just so that it's clear. Just maybe there could be some regex that looks for all Istio filter patterns, regardless if they have a suffix with the version, but then again, the test would repeat itself on all of those files. So yeah, I think that'd be really good. Now that we're speaking about this, so yeah, I hadn't thought about the version, so thanks for that. I think you've saved me like half day of thinking about that.
Well,
good to ask. Thank you.
Yeah. No, this is good. I mean, one thing to, as you think about it, one thing to be very well aware of is there's two things. One, that the WebAssembly filters that are being included as seed content, like as initial content in a Meshery release, that those aren't versioned today, but Ashish and Utkarsh and maybe Rudraksh, somewhere between the three of those gentlemen, they are actively contemplating, or the fact that like that needs to happen. They need to be versioned and released as independent binaries that can be picked up and put into Meshery. And so a lot of those mechanics are there. So at some point, those filters will be versioned. There is, okay, fine. So then if that's going to be true from here on out, would it be the case that when we think about testing those, do we need to bother with, well, I don't know, like, I guess there's two things, like, hey, if you've got some filters that are out of the box, like, hey, there's tests that can be written that use those and just leverage them as built-in content, as built-in capabilities, and go do things with them. And if we expect for these built-in filters to be long-standing, like, pretty much in Meshery and available in future Meshery releases for as far as the eye can see, then it's probably a pretty good idea to write a few tests around those, because they're not gonna go away necessarily. Fine, good, but also the thing that one of the things that you're highlighting is that, like, well, and it was Utkarsh, I think, was just talking about the fact that Meshry supports, you can do a Meshry deployment and then you can import in new filters. And so okay, fine. So that functionality needs to be tested as well. Part of what you might be thinking about is like, well, okay, so what filters should we be using? Like, should we be using the same filters that come out of the box as tests for importing those? Or does that need to be something different? And if so, then is there a static place that we can always rely on those being available and build tests around? I don't know if all of that is what you were kind of considering.
So we're talking about the binaries, right? Like versioning them and having the binaries. Well, if you ask me, I think that the upload today might not accept like binary files. At least that's what I'm thinking, because the JSX that I've been looking at for the uploads, it just accepts like 3 different formats, like YAML and other 1 or 2. But it didn't feel to me like it would accept some other format.
So actually, yeah, it does accept other formats, including if something can be represented as Kubernetes manifest, that's a format. Everything won't be able to, like, we cannot represent everything that can be done via patterns in manifest, because this is more of a superset of even Kubernetes manifests. The second format would be actually Cytoscape JSON. That's a format that's supported. The third format is actually, you can code everything in JSON, and that's also a supported format. So YAML JSON, Cytoscape JSON, and Kubernetes manifest, all of them are supported formats.
Okay, so then even though that the JSX doesn't have it, so is it just, so the formats provided in that JavaScript, in that React code base, so is it just for the browser to try to help it, like
yeah, actually,
like
so
how
yeah, so in the UI, the format that is visible is actually YAML. The reason that is the case is because you can submit patterns in any format. As I mentioned, YAML, JSON, Cytoscape JSON, or Kubernetes manifest, which could be again YAML or JSON. Actually, YAML is the only one supported, but yeah, you can submit it in any format. But the way we store it, the way we preserve it, is actually in YAML, and that is the reason you can only access it. Like when you click on something, all you can see is YAML. It doesn't matter if you uploaded a JSON or even a Cytoscape JSON, which with all of Cytoscape annotations. If you would click on this particular panel, you would be able to see it in YAML only, because that's the format we actually store patterns in. So.
because I see that there's label input and then there's accept.yaml.yml.json. So I'm not sure if
actually,
there would
so
be like some.
Yep, actually, that's what I was mentioning under this topic, and that is Meshry actually supports multiple. Okay, I cannot see it, just. So Meshry can actually support multiple formats, multiple ways of uploading stuff. The thing is that right now it's not quite exposed in here, exposed in this particular UI, but because Meshry UI is not the only client of Meshry server. Meshry CTL is another client of Meshry CTL. You can actually of Meshry server, you can actually use that to basically pass or pass different type of content, including, as I mentioned, JSON or yeah. So that's actually you're right. It's not quite accepted from here, but it's
No, I mean, sorry, I tried to be more clear. There's an accept attribute in the HTML element. So I thought that since it didn't say accept and then the format that we're talking about, it wouldn't accept it, but it's actually, I just went over the MSDN docs, so it'll not validate the format. So even though it doesn't say like a specific format, this is just for the browser to hint, or to hint the browser. Let's say there's a file picker. The file picker of the browser would try. What I'm trying to say, it would only show, or it might only show like those formats. So it would make the user think that the binary is not accepted. But it really depends on the browser and on the OS, you know? Like the user would have to modify the file picker's dropdowns, like move it to all and then select the binary. That's my assumption because of what the MSDN docs say. Could you confirm that?
Yeah. So yeah, actually, as I was mentioning, right now UI like UI supports only uploading YAMLs. It is sort of it is sort of limiting the capabilities of a Mesh server. Mesh server supports multiple of the formats, but the reason you may not want to actually change the you were right. We mentioned YAML is the only supported format, like we specify except in there. Yeah. The issue would be that if you would actually change that and try to upload JSON, the upload won't quite work. The reason is that Mesh server needs to know what format it is so that it can do the transformation internally. And because and for that actually it uses content type. I think that's the header it uses to determine what the content type is. And that is how the Mesh server's client is supposed to tell that. Basically, the approach is exactly similar to how Kubernetes API works. Kubernetes API also supports free format JSON, protobuf, and YAML. And you can also specify in there that what kind of thing you are sending. So that's the exact same like structure Mesh server also adopts. In here, you have to specify that what it is, but because the API call header won't have that particular header attached, it won't have that attribute. So it won't, basically the upload would fail because it would assume that it is actually YAML because the client said so, but the client was, so yeah, I hope I'm making sense. The thing is that right now, it is sort of hard-coded in UI that YAML is the only content that can come in.
So then if a UI user would try to use a binary, would it be supported? Would it work?
No, in the patterns it won't work. The upload would fail. The reason is that there is some validation that goes on in the backend.
Yeah.
That actually fails. So the upload would actually.
But what about filters? Is it the same story?
For filters, actually, the upload would go through, but I think Navindu is the better person to talk about that because, yeah. But I think for filters, the upload would go through because it is treated as a byte array. So anything that comes in, that's acceptable. So yeah, I think that's how filter upload works.
Okay.
It's quite different with from pattern upload.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about the filters because all of those three, is there like a binary form of that or is that specific to filter?
I think actually not that I think binary is specific to filters, while application and patterns are only. Patterns could be YAML, JSON, site-safe JSON, Kubernetes manifest. Application could be only YAML, and filters can be binary along with a YAML-based file. So
yeah, because what I'm trying to say is that when we use a browser, the accept attribute would, or it might. Can you try to upload a filter and see if by default you in the picker you can see a binary? Like, do you have binaries in your You see they're highlighted, you see? So that means that we would make a user, let's say you have a binary there. Could you create a binary just, even though it doesn't work, just like the dot, like just right click wherever and just pretend it's a binary, like just name it accordingly. So what I'm trying to say is that the things that Cypress can test is like this picker. So by graying out any files here, we're making the user think that it's not supported, but it is. So the way to make this not gray out on binaries would be to modify our component so that the accept includes the binaries extension, right? So then they would those binaries wouldn't gray out, and any user would not assume that it's not supported, because that's what I'm thinking. If the file grays out, I'm thinking it's not supported. I'm trying, putting that user hat on, like a really regular user, not a power user that would like just go to the code base, or I don't know, documentation, and but that's just an observation. Hope, does it make sense? Or
Oh yeah, like resoundingly. I mean, even for the power user that might muscle through it and like sort of roll their eyes and ignore the bad UX, it's still not good. I mean, it's
okay, good. Yeah, because that was part of my confusion when I was going over this, like a bit, like, so we support binary, but it's not in the accept attribute, so then it's not supported, or is it supported? And that made me like stumble a bit. And instead of making some progress on the test, I was focusing on that, or maybe just thinking about different test inputs, like maybe we should test with different formats, but like, okay, so which ones are they? So then now that we're talking, I think this is clearer. So I'll just take a look at the binaries. Or maybe I could wait for, so eventually the binaries will be like release artifacts of that repo, right?
correct.
So instead of me building them and then adding them in the Cypress test, maybe it'd be better for those binaries to be taken from GitHub. I don't know, because if they're artifacts, I could use the GitHub CLI and just grab them during runtime, or maybe there are some script so that they're downloaded. I don't know, but anyways, yeah, I don't want to take all the meeting time. Sorry. So that's all. I'll keep taking a look at the actual test, but I think this helps a lot. Thank you all.
Okay. So let's.
So should I create an issue based on this observation of the accept format?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, please. By the way, just
Okay,
to
and what's a WASM binary format? Like, what's the extension?
It's wasm dot
WASM?
Yeah, although yeah, it's mostly dot wasm. It could be dot WAT as well. So, or it could be none as well. None in case. So some operating systems do support content with no extension, and they can still identify what content type it is. Unlike Windows cannot identify if you change the extension. So yeah, all three works actually. What was none.
Okay. Could you write in the chat like the formats, just so that I can just make sure I don't misspell them, please?
Did you say .wd or WT?
WAT. It's WebAssembly text, so you can write assembly and.
Yeah. By the way, to recap this briefly from my own understanding, so if a user uses the CLI client, Mastery CTL, that client supports importing filters to Mastery server. It'll import the binary file. Or like, I guess, go recap real quickly for me, Utkarsh, the limitations of the UI. Did you say that users can't import binaries through the UI, or they can?
Yeah, actually, I was mentioning that that although Mastery server supports importing from multiple formats, so you can actually say site escape JSON and it will just work. You can say it's a YAML and it will still work. If you say nothing, it means YAML. If you say it's content type is it is JSON, it can accept JSON. And you can also say this is queries manifest, first convert and then save. So that is also acceptable. While the UI only supports YAML because it does not say anything. So server assumes it's YAML, and if you upload anything else, it's going to error out because it does some validation. It's going to error out that whatever you gave in, that's definitely not pattern, and it's going to return an error basically. While in the actually even meshmap also have this kind of validation. I mean, meshmap also does this upload form. Basically, what meshmap does is it leverages Mesh3 server's UI to specify that this site escape JSON, save this, but convert it before saving. So those are things that meshmap is doing while UI is not. I think Mesh3 CTL also supports. I think it supports JSON as well, if I'm not wrong. But that's something probably Piyush can talk more about, but he's not here. Yeah.
I had a doubt. You said that .wat files can also be here. So I mean, I was I had an idea that only the compiled WASM binaries can be dropped. That's just a text file. So how are we supporting that? Right.
Yeah, actually, I think not recently, but a while back, support for WASM, there is an echo, weird echo. Support for WASM text was also added. That is, you can write simple WebAssembly and you can just send it off. So, and that will actually work. As far, as far as I remember, that does work. Let me check.
For the Envoy filter resource in Istio you're talking about.
Yep. Yeah.
So it compiles on the fly.
I suppose it does. Yeah, it should, because V8 engine does not. So it should.
That might be a good item, a future meeting item to potentially follow up on, just to confirm.
Yep. So it should. Yep.
Yeah, apologies. I was just going to suggest that it might also be a good future meeting item to just like demonstrate, or to answer that same question that you just answered, but through demonstration of like, hey, walking through the UX of importing a filter into the UI, or maybe through the Mesh3 CTL. It might serve to refresh or educate the rest, some of the rest of us. It also might serve as a point of fresh reflection, to the extent that, like what Mario was pointing out, that there's, enhancements to be done. It's a V1, it's the first time that capability is being developed and released. And so, excuse me. And so it's ripe for improvement. So if we do a demo or something, we might, yeah.
Okay.
Ashish, another thing, Ashish, you've been doing a lot around dynamically importing seed content in some of the same ways that Mario was just discussing that would need to be done for the Cypress testing. It'd probably be good if you share some notes there, kind of point to what's being done now, which should be in Mesh3 docs at this point. So. I can feel Ashish rolling his eyes from here. Cool.
So we have a few items left on the agenda, but we are basically it's 9:30. It's time. Should we go ahead with the agendas, or is someone interested in looking at Istio's WASM plugin support in Mesh3? Okay. So thank you for coming to the meeting. In case someone wants to drop off, you can, or if you're interested in support for WASM plugin in Mesh3 without doing anything, you can actually stay. So yeah, let's get started. Let me pull up the pattern which was here. Well, right now it's not. Okay, yeah. So this is a YAML, as everyone can see. What this is going to do, this particular YAML, is that it's going to okay, let me go through this particular YAML in case someone is not familiar of how patterns look like. What I'm doing in this particular stage is actually I'm creating a namespace test. If a namespace already exists, this step is actually basically it is ignored. At the same time, parallelly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provision Istio service mesh. Both of the steps are going to happen parallelly at the same time. What I'm doing here is I'm actually saying that provision Istio service mesh and Istio-system namespace. This is the version I'm requesting. I'm requesting the latest one, that is 1.12. The reason is that I'm demoing wasn't plugin, and that's available in latest Istio. I'm also saying that, hey, please enable automatic sidecar injection in namespaces. This is an expression which would be evaluated on the runtime. What I'm basically saying is that, hey, go ahead into this particular service and whatever namespace that I've created, enable automatic sidecar injection in that particular namespace. These two steps are happening manually. As soon as they complete, the workflow would move on to this stage and this stage, because I specified dependencies. I'm saying that please make sure that you run this particular thing if and only if this and this step not only complete, they also complete successfully. Only then this particular step would be executed at this and also this particular step. So what's going to happen in this step is actually I'll provision an application, because I want to demo that the WASM plugin is actually working. The WASM bindery is actually working. So what is happening is I'm actually provisioning an application. Replicas are going to be one. I'm placing a label. This label could be anything. This is just something for selectors. I'm spinning up Nginx image, Nginx container, because that's the easiest thing to do. This is it. This is all you need to actually provision a particular application in Mishri. It will also ensure that you can access it access it from your browser, because it provisions load balancer for you. So yeah, this is actually more than enough to provision application. A lot of stuff in here is not actually required to provision application, so it looks far more smaller if you just want to provision application. The last step is actually, this is a newest addition that I was about to talk. Basically, we talked last week also about this, and that was support for WASM plugin.istio. This is not something that we added support for manually because of the way that we have basically we have architected stuff, and Ashish has added support for dynamic component registration. So what happened dynamically was my Raptor was already running, but because every 24 hours it takes, it fetches the new Istio. Basically, it figures out that, okay, there is a new Istio release. Now, if there is a new release, let me register new components, and automatically the support was added for this particular component. So now I can, if you have adapter running, and if it's not very old, or like if it's not a month or 2 month old, you should also have support for this thing. So yeah, you can run this pattern with your old adapter, and it should just work fine, because like I didn't change a line of code for this thing to work. And once all you have to do here is, what I'm doing is I'm actually specifying that, hey, please pull in this particular WASM bindery. In the selectors, I'm saying that match all of the workloads which have this particular label, and that is actually this label that I actually attached. It is a fancy label because I could. So, and this is plugin config. Plugin config is actually, so if someone has seen onward filter support for Istio, which was earlier, this used to be string. And right now it's not. It's a struct. You have to specify it in this particular format. You cannot encode in base64 and do stuff like that. You have to specify it in map kind of way. That's how it is supposed to be encoded. Now, if you won't, the particular step would fail. What I'm saying here is that prefix, any request that comes that has this particular prefix, if it has get method, the method of HTTP request is get, then actually basically add authentication onto that. And these two credentials are actually supported. This is base64 encoded. This is not base64 encoded. So if I actually apply this particular YAML, I have the same thing here. And it was actually uploaded dynamically. So if I do meshctl apply, It will take a while because, again, because token is expired.
It can work with any wasm binary, right?
Yeah, actually, it will work with any wasm binary, but you will face hiccups if you try to use the rate limiter one we have. The reason is that actually I would have demoed that one instead of using base authentication. The hiccup that you would actually face is that the configuration that it accepts is in base 64 encoded format, and like right now you are supposed to give configuration, as I was mentioning. You have to give configuration as if it was a struct and not a string. Earlier in Envoy filter used to accept configuration as string. Envoy filter still actually accepts configuration as string. So if you would actually check the logs, the thing that it's the configuration that it receives, it is actually string. Actually, Istio is serializing the configuration that we are sending. I'm not sure why, but yeah, that's how it is. So yeah, technically every wasm binary should work. Even the rate limiter would work. The only caveat is that it will throw error that, hey, you haven't provided me configuration, or you haven't provided me. Actually, instead of throwing error, it would actually panic. But yeah, theoretically, it will work. You can drop in that particular wasm also. So let me update the token because my token has expired. Please. The reason we actually require token, if it seems unnecessary, it's not quite unnecessary. The reason is that we also actually keep track of the resources that we have provisioned, just not because we want to or for the sake of keeping track, but because it's also useful. We also make sure that update operations are actually updated and not treated as create, and basically that particular metadata helps us a lot. And at the same time, it is supposed to help us map the state of the cluster with the state that we are maintaining internally, so that we can do mappings of the state of the cluster in the internal data that we have and attach other metadata to it. So the pattern has applied successfully. It is saying pattern applied successfully. It did some installation, enabled automatic recycler injection, also deployed this particular application, and created wasm plugin sample. So let's see if it's not lying. So
was that feedback on the CLI? Was that?
Yeah, actually, this is something that Meshi server does generate. It sends it to the clients as well. It's ignored by the UI at the moment. So Meshi server does send this feedback that what exactly happened, because sometimes it can happen that partial things succeeded, partial failed. The reason it would happen is that you said that this thing is completely independent of everything. There is no dependence on. So in that case, the partial workflow would still succeed. So in that case, actually, Meshi server also lets you know that, okay, this particular section failed while these all succeeded. So yeah, it does send you the feedback that what exactly happened. It collects, aggregates, and then sends. So it's not quite interactive, but yeah, it does sends. Basically, it sends you back the feedback. So
yeah. Sorry to wow, I'm getting stuck. So wait, remind me again. So that was a synchronous call that was made, and that's the how the responses were funneled back.
Actually, the API is sort of synchronous. That is, when we send the request to Meshi server, it does stuff parallelly. It aggregates all of the things happening. So that is why, like, if I apply this thing again, the order of the messages would be different, because probably things scheduled different way. But it aggregates and then finally sends back. It's not a requirement. It's just how I initially created the API. We could actually stream back the response as they are coming in. Right now, it's just not happening. We are aggregating and then finally sending it back.
Gotcha. What do you guys think? Briefly, a bit of a different UX in which maybe we just prepend, like this feedback that comes back is wonderful. It's detailed confirmation of how their infrastructure has been, how their request has been fulfilled. This is really needed in the Mesh UI. I wonder if we were to put some character in front of those messages so that Like, do we need to denote the fact that this came back from the server, or is just getting this as output from S3CTL just as well? Something to think about. Yeah, it might be that this is just as well, that we would just clean up the messages a little bit in terms of what they say, but do you get my meaning? Like the difference between mesh-to-CTL itself saying something back versus like, here's what I received from, here's confirmation from the server. I don't know.
Actually, everything is server right now.
from
Everything
the
was sent by the server. Actually, it's so server just sent it. The original responders were the components which are handling it. So some, for example, because I wrote the logs, I wrote them as a Sveno. This one actually came from Meshi server itself because Meshi server was handling the deployment, while this one and this one came from Istio adapter because they were handling these components. This is also something came from Istio adapter. It should have been longer. It should have said more instead of just saying installed. Right now it's saying install. Basically, it meant that installed Istio service mesh. But yeah, it's not saying that. It should. Yeah. So. So now, as I was talking about, the application has been deployed. There are 2 containers, obviously, because I specifically instructed Mishri to make sure that automatic cycle injection is enabled on test namespace. So it did enable that. And after that, it provisioned us this particular application for me. So there are 2 containers. One of them is actually the proxy. Another one is actually the application, the Nginx container. If I would try to access it on this particular address, I should be able to. Okay, it has cached. Yep, so it's actually showing me the prompt to enter username and password. And if I hope everyone knows, there is no authentication in default Nginx. You just get a welcome message. So this is something that was indeed added by the packet, by the WASM extension. And if I enter admin3, that's the username, that's the password, and I click on sign in, I can access this particular page. The reason admin3 and admin3 was the username password was because the pattern that I actually uploaded was had this particular credentials in this. It's just base64 encoded. It's admin3 code and admin3 written in encoded format. So yeah, this is how Mishri supports WASM plugin without adding any lines of code, and it should work in your older adapters as well, if it's not older than a month or something, because that's basically Ashish added it about a month ago, as far as I remember. So yep.
I had a question about this. Right now, like this is just a workload. Does this have any area of becoming a trait or?
Yep. So yeah, that's okay. Ashish is the one who. Yeah. So yeah, that's also something that I was sort of suggesting. The only caveat is that I mean, you are the one, Ashish, who has actually created dynamic component registration. So probably you would face the trouble to identify which of them are going to be traits and which of them are going to be workloads. But that's something that would be probably nice, because what it will allow in terms of mesh map, or even for validation, is that basically you will be able to specify that this thing is supposed to be attached to something and this is not a different workload. And also you'll be able to specify that this thing can be only attached to these things, like a pod or a deployment or a rollout or an application, these kind of things. So in terms of validation also, it would be far more richer. In terms of mesh map also, like the UI would get far more richer, because it doesn't have to do things manually, which it is doing. And probably it's not its responsibility, because adapters are the one creating the components. They should have the responsibility of also annotating it with this stuff, like with this kind of metadata. So yeah, I think that this should be a trait. And onward filter.istio should be probably also, it should be a trait.
Okay, so okay, so talking about only this thing. So let's say that someone is running an old adapter and we have converted this into a trait. Would we expect some backwards compatibility and also have this as a workload and also as a trait?
Okay. Actually, yeah. So that doesn't like if someone is running an older adapter, then because adapter is the source of truth, it registered schema. So it said that this is not workload, this is not trait, this is workload, and everything's going to work out just fine. Even if mesh version is latest while adapter is older, because adapter is like authority here, and mesh server is just going to do the validation. So it's just going to still work out, right? So how would the compatibility break unless and until you were talking about the like backwards compatibility of a particular pattern, like the pattern is older while the adapter is newer. So was that clear enough?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So yep, any more comments?
I don't know that people have seen this kind of software that much. Actually, I think people have seen this kind of software a lot, and they see it in the form of like a virus, which is to say that like the software is updating itself. It is the year 2021, so I guess this is kind of appropriate, but it's just like none of the other management pieces of management software in this field do that, right? Like I haven't seen this from any of them. Yeah, the closest that I've come to seeing this is still required manual, like human intervention to go. Like I just haven't, like it used to be that you might be managing a device using SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. And the way that that protocol works is that largely you speak to a device or a system, an operating system, a device, an application, a thing. You would typically, it would support a base level of responses. You could ask it like, what's its name and what is, these base things. And then typically if the system was trying to support being remotely managed through SNMP, it would also come with its own MIBs, its own management information base, like its own special package that describes itself and that you can query and keep track of its own health. And so when a management system would go over and talk to a new device, usually there's a bunch of engineering time and coding and things that have to go on to like support that new device, that new type, that new package, and to build in that. So when you got to wait for the release of the management system itself to then support that new version of that new device and et cetera. And like it's a long cycle. Sometimes you'll find a management system that it'll do some discovery and say, well, I did find this other simple SNMP. I can treat this device as a simple SNMP device because that's as far as I can get with it. Like I don't understand the new packages that it has. So at least I could do that much. So I could tell you there's a device at this IP address and it's responding in this way. And that's about it. Like from here on out, I can do ping tests and tell you if it's up, kind of a thing. So anyway, to leapfrog way past that, and do that on a schedule, figure it out, download the new software, deploy the software, like create new software components, register those, make it available to a user, and a user can literally just use it. And the user could actually see those changes in the UI, because I bet you if you go into the pattern configurator, you're gonna see those new components. This is pretty ridiculous. And like, I'm just being honest, I'm being truthful. Like it's like almost 30 something years of writing software for me and creating products. And just, they don't make software like this. This is pretty, I have to go tell a story about this. Like most people won't get like the reality, like how this is a step forward. It's a pretty interesting. You don't have to wait for another Meshery release to go support this stuff and see it in the UI and actually see it like as soon as we get some of this UI cleaned up, and it's coming along, but the more that we get it cleaned up, well, it'll have been as if there were any number of development sprints and a whole new product release, but it would have been done overnight, right? You just have to wait 12 hours for the schedule to kick in or whatever. So, wow. Well, we've got some docs to go write about, some of the aspects of these things, and to go, because right now the service mesh patterns documentation, more or less just says it doesn't talk about this stuff. So that's really interesting. It's really interesting. Yeah. Boy, another very helpful thing for every user, like if I'm running Istio or whatever, whatever service mesh, and the new one comes out, it's like, oh yeah, let's dig into that one and see what's different. It's like, okay, well, what is different? Well, you can go to the release notes and read the release notes, and they've probably done a good job of highlighting the big changes from one to the next. And if there's like caveats to upgrade, but also like a software like this is readily accessible to show you the functional differences between the two, and to show you, here's what you're using of the current version, here's what you're not using of the next version. It doesn't have to grease the wheels much more than it doesn't have to do an automatic upgrade. That's not what we're talking about, but it really helps facilitate the upgrade. You get to see where you're at, what has changed. Yeah, so good. It's not always obvious, some of the stuff that we do and talk about and the effort that we put in. It's not always immediately obvious. Like, is like, really? Are we really going to use this stuff? Is this really going to like, and actually it did, right? Like, it made it possible for Utkarsh to demo it without having done, without having done a ton. I mean, you had to come up with the example and do the tests and do, we didn't have to go write new code. Yeah. Wow. Man. All right. Well, KubeCon EU or KubeCon, whatever. There's a CFP open, and I can just see the title to that submission right now. Like there's like 10 different titles I'm thinking of. Like, it's really, oh man, God, I feel sorry for some of the competition in this area. They just don't have the same. Yeah. All right. Ashish, you better brush up on your speaking skills because it's time. Look at that, V060 RC1 too. That's cool. Awesome. I hope you get. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're good.
Oh, I hope you guys are having a good Monday. It's a pretty good Monday over here.
So
thanks.
Yeah, good.
No, thanks for having us stay on to see this through. Do we think that we're ready to have Intel on to do the neural networking presentation in WASM? I held off on bringing those folks on. They were very, happy to, but I held off just because, we got a lot of things going on but just having them present doesn't mean that we're committing to anything. It might be the right thing to explore, to let that soak in some, to maybe start to build that relationship. I was highlighting to a couple of you over the weekend that Uber had released Crisp, which is really interesting to, Crisp. really interesting to things that we're doing in Nighthawk. And it's in some respects, it's like, geez, that's what we're trying to do, which is fine that they release it. It's actually helpful to understanding in part where we're trying to go. And but the WASM, the neural networking in WASM, like this CRISP and that stuff kind of go hand in hand, and like some really interesting things to do. So cool. Well, I'll probably ask the Intel folks to go ahead and get them on the calendar. Yeah.
So I think
With
we
that-
are, yeah, good.
No, yeah, I was going to say the same thing as you. And thanks a bunch for hosting, Karsh. It's nice to see all this.
Okay, let's wrap it up. We are 27 minutes over. So let's meet tomorrow in our development meeting. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Karsh. Bye, all. See you guys. Bye for now.